Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside the Issues, sponsored by the League of Women Voters Richfield. My name is Maureen Scalia and I have the pleasure of serving as the moderator. Tonight I'd like to welcome three people to our program. Very honored to have you and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. On my immediate left is Ben Knudsen. Ben is a waste reduction and recycling specialist. It's kind of a mouthful, but we'll get into that later.
Better than an acronym, right?
Yes, better than an acronym. And then next is Amanda Keeper. I had it right in my head, and then I said the wrong thing.
It's a tough one.
She's a citizen of Richfield, but she's a master recycler and composter. And we'll talk a little bit more about the master recycler and composter program. Jeremy Bartow, on my far left, is also a master recycler and composter. Welcome to the program,
Thank
Jeremy.
you, Maureen.
Ben, I like to let my audience find out a little bit more about my guests. If you could share a few things.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me here. I grew up in Nebraska, and then I moved to Minnesota to go to college, to McAllister College in St. Paul, and had a few jobs before working for the county, but I've worked there for almost 13 years now, so it's been a long time.
No, it hasn't. You look very young to me. Okay. Amanda, a few words?
Yeah, so I've been living in Richfield for almost 2 years now, but I've been in the Twin Cities area for about a decade. I'm originally from Missouri, so also a transplant, I guess,
Yes.
to Minnesota. My day job is I work as a natural resources planner for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. So my background's in conservation biology and ecology. I have I guess you could kind of tell, a natural interest in the organics recycling and recycling issues. So I look forward to talking about it.
And I would imagine the environment in general.
Yes.
Okay, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Maureen, again. Technically, my last name is Bartels.
Bartels.
Yeah, depends on who you ask in the family, because it may be Bartels or Barthels, so I say Bartels, though.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I'm also a resident of Richfield. I've been there this May is 3 years, my wife and I, and we have 2 dogs and a number of chickens that we raise at home, and so it's a lot of fun. I'm originally from Wisconsin. Go Pack. I'm a big Packer fan. Yeah, I know.
We'll
even here, I'll make some heroes and some villains with that comment. But I've been living in the Twin Cities area since early 2000, and like I said, just in Richfield the last 3 years. So I'm excited to be on the show tonight. Thank you.
And the chicken movement is a growing movement, right? And amongst the metro area, more and more people are.
Yeah, I
raising
think
chickens.
it's bunched in with the concept of urban farming. People, making their own gardens in the front and backyards and that sort of thing. But yeah, chickens and having chickens is kind of the new trend in the Twin Cities. There's the chicken coop tour. I think that's in the fall, that you can go around the Twin Cities and see various different chicken coops, how people have it set up. It's really unique. So there's some people with these tiny, tiny little coops that they make it work, and I have a bigger one, like a walk-in chicken coop that is fun. So it's easier to clean for me. So yeah.
Just go along with the other fall occupant of Richfield, and that's the turkeys.
Oh yeah.
Seem to.
And the deer too. We have deer. I live over on the east side by Veterans Park, and so we have deer that show up in our yard and stuff like that.
And then you have to worry about the natural predators out there, be it air with the hawks and eagles,
yeah.
and then with the coyotes.
Yeah, I've almost lost a few chickens due to the hawks. So it got to be to the point where if I wanted to let them free range in their little area, I actually have a net up covering the chicken area. Yeah, so then I don't have to worry about it.
The hawks.
These are good tips.
Yeah.
I'd like to be an urban chicken farmer someday. We're starting with fruit trees this year. That's the big urban farming addition to the yard.
I finally said, that's it, when I was standing out with the chickens and a hawk came down about 10 feet from me and tried to snatch a chicken. Wow. Even with me being in the chicken area, they don't care. They're fearless. So
yeah, and they're totally adapted to the urban environment. People make no difference Wow. Yeah, this is a farmer's daughter, so, you could take the girl off the farm, but you never take the farm out of the girl. So I have thought about, thinking about raising chickens. So, well, this is not about chickens. We're going to get to recycling. So, and any of you can start. Why do we do recycling? Here in the metro area, we seem to be yards away from a lot of different states. As I travel, I found in some places that they do no recycling, at least as a hotel guest or even walking around their parks or areas. Why recycle?
For me, it's all about conserving natural resources and making a connection with the land, with the earth. To bring it full circle back, kind of back to farming. My dad was a farmer in Nebraska, so growing up, I had that connection to the land, where food comes from, and I had an awesome 6th grade science teacher who got us into recycling back when I was just collecting newspapers and milk jugs in a parking lot with a big semi. And so it makes sense, rather than going off to the far reaches of the earth and mining those resources or cutting down trees, why not just pluck it out of a bin and use it to make new products?
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that. For me, I guess recycling's always been kind of second nature because I grew up with it, and I really have to give my parents credit because, growing up in the suburbs in Missouri, curbside recycling wasn't even an option, but ever since I can remember as a little kid, my parents had a whole bunch of bins in the garage, and they separated the steel cans and the aluminum cans and the milk jugs and the paper, and they did that for years and years before curbside was even an option. So I guess, I was sort of raised with this idea that it's very wasteful to not recycle because it's a perfectly good resource that just ends up in the garbage. So for me, there's a strong environmental reason to recycle, but there's also just this very practical reason, why would you throw something perfectly good in the garbage?
Jeremy?
Yeah, I think for me, echoing Ben and Amanda, it's common sense to me. You mentioned biology, chemistry. One of my degrees is biology and chemistry, so I have that background and understand that we have finite resources on this planet, and they will run out at some point, and why not make the best of what we can and recycle and reuse what products we can use. Also, when I was younger, growing up, my grandparents, they lived out kind of in the countryside, and to take care of their trash, they literally drove to a dump and had a dump, and they would throw it in. And my other grandparents lived on a farm. They had a farm, and they had their own little dump too. So just that being this stuff goes somewhere. And I always would think, and if neighborhoods had their own dumps, to see actually where this stuff goes and the products that they buy, where it ends up, it kind of gives you a different thought process of what you're doing with your trash and where is it going to go in the long run and that sort of thing. So since then, kind of shifted my view on that, and I've had the opportunity to travel in Europe quite a bit, and certain countries over there are light years ahead with their recycling.
Yeah.
And so in my late teens and early 20s, I was exposed to that, and I was just whoa, this is amazing. The bottle recycling that they have for everything, everywhere you go, there's recycling containers, and it's really frowned upon if you don't recycle, and if you're not putting the right, trash in the right container and recycling the right sort of items and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and we can learn always from other countries who do seem to be ahead of us on some of this, or other states, in our case, in the United States. People talk about the 3 R's of recycling. Somebody want to say what they are?
Reduce, reuse, recycle, in that order.
Reduce,
That's right.
reuse, recycle. Yeah. And the reduction is important too. How can we, examples of that? Anybody?
Yeah, I can start on this one. So, I said in that order because I think everyone hears about the 3 R's, but we think a lot about recycling because there's residential programs for that. It's sort of something that you learn when you're a kid, that this is something you can do to help the earth, is recycle. But it's actually the last one, because the first things you want to do is actually try to reduce your consumption in the first place, or stop something from ever being made, and then reuse it if it's already made, and then if you have to, recycle it. But when it comes to reducing, I think that there's a lot of kind of small things that people can do to try to reduce their consumption of waste. And I think a big one to think about is reducing plastic consumption.
Yep.
Because, you know, and maybe we'll talk about recycling later, but plastics are particularly difficult to recycle because there's so many different kinds. And you know, I remember learning that at least a third of our our plastics never even make it to the landfill, much less the recycling center. They just sort of get dispersed into the environment. So reducing plastic, I think, is a really useful thing for people to do, and there's all kinds of options for that. Like, you know, you can use a reusable water bottle instead of a plastic one. You can shop in bulk at the grocery store and bring your own mason jars or cloth bags to be able to buy food in bulk. Try to avoid buying things that come in mounds and mounds and mounds of packaging. So those are a few things that I think of off the bat for reducing.
How about an example of reuse?
I like bringing your coffee mug. Let's say you're going to
Sure.
Caribou or John Brothers or your local coffee shop. Just bring your own reusable mug, and it's amazing how many coffee cups that can save. And then another maybe small but symbolic thing that I like is what Oakland City Council, this is out in California, they said, hey, we want to have a setup at restaurants where they don't automatically put a straw in the cup.
Yes.
They'll give you one upon request, but it's changing the culture a little bit so that we don't default to waste. And in many ways, you know, maybe a lot of people don't even need straws. They can make it all the way to the cup without getting that little assist from the straw. But
Well, it's those darn ice cubes that
it's true. It's true.
But there is, and I was reading about that too, about the banning plastic straws. Apparently, you can buy reusable straws.
You can.
I haven't seen them, but apparently you can buy them.
And something that's was brought home to me too, if you volunteer for an Earth Day cleanup event and you go down by the river or you go to Wood Lake Nature Park, and it's like, wow, you find so many of these things in the environment. You see straws, you see plastic wrappers, you see a lot of those plastics out there, and it's like, what can we do to get those out of the environment? And
That's the 1/3 escaped plastic.
Plastic.
Yeah, I'm a steward of Veterans Park for cleanups and stuff like that. And we're actually hosting a cleanup here on June 2nd at 9 a.m. at Veterans Park. Yeah, one of with Kathleen from the Advisory Board of Health. But we, I've done like 3 or 4 cleanups at Veterans Park, and plastic is just, most of what we pick up is just plastic in the water along the shore, and little bottle caps, you know, of plastic, and it just doesn't seem like very much, but when you're working with the animals in that area, that consumption of that can be very, very dangerous and stuff like that. And so, and another thing about reducing is we're all consumers, and there's things that we want to buy and buy daily, monthly, weekly, whatever it may be. For me, I really try to take a conscientious sort of perspective of, okay, saying, what is the minimum amount of packaging I can purchase this in? And kind of look for that, and not always just go for the easiest, but necessarily more of the, like, what is more environmentally sound. So like shopping in bulk and taking, you know, maybe big plastic containers or mason jars, whatever you're using to transport back and forth, to avoid the cardboard box and the plastic lining or whatever it may be. So we're always trying to find ways to reduce that sort of consumption of plastic in general, because everything's just kind of enwrapped in plastics to some degree. So
Right.
I know the League of Women Voters also has a Adopt a Park in Richfield, and yeah, I can second that plastic is the big thing that we're picking up. But I'd like to think too that people just take their kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews to parks and whatnot to just pick up the plastic. And, you know, even on a parking lot, if a plastic bag is blowing around, I'll try to make it. The other thing I like to do, went to some talk and somebody talked about it, is I have a pan sitting in one of the two sinks. And like if I'm rinsing vegetables and fruits, or rinsing like dishes that you have to hand wash, I'll collect that. And then I throw it out the door and trying to recycle that water rather than just run it down the drain to the Mississippi, try to get back into the earth to get down to the aquifer. And I think if everybody were doing that, that might make a difference.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It doesn't take much. I mean, just one simple thing like bringing your recyclable mug or your reusable mug to get coffee with can make a big difference in a year's time. Just that one thing, if you just do that, that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and one more reuse thing that I'd throw out there. I'm a big fan of buying from thrift stores or consignment
Yes,
or
yes,
Craigslist.
me too.
There's a lot of fun opportunities in Richfield and in the surrounding cities for reuse. We're entering into garage sale season, now that it's spring, so keep an eye out for those. You never know what you'll find. But my husband and I live pretty near to Ark's Value Village, and we just love that place. It has a great mission. They do a lot of good in the community, and they also are a great place to find reused things and give them a second life, whether you're donating something that you don't want anymore, or finding something that you need but don't necessarily need to buy new.
And one of my biggest hobbies is reading. And I pride myself on never buying new books. I go to the library, obviously, but if it's a book I want to keep, or I think will be out of print by the time I get to read it. No, not quite that bad. But, it's kind of almost a game for me, to buy a used book at the lowest possible
It's like a
price.
treasure hunt.
Yeah, it is a
Treasure
treasure
hunt,
hunt.
yeah,
Yeah.
is the perfect word. And a lot of people have questions about the different things that they have in their houses and whatnot, about how to get rid of it in a recyclable way. And there's a fantastic place on the Hennepin County Recycling website. It's called the Green Disposal Guide. And it's alphabetical. And you can find anything there from mattresses. Those can go to the hazardous waste drop-offs. And they don't take sleep number beds. I'm not sure why, but they don't take those. Maybe because they can't get the stuffing out of them. I don't know. Do you know what that is and why?
I think they're constructed a little differently so that it's hard to separate the
parts.
foam from this metal and tear it
Okay.
all apart to sell off those individual pieces.
But I'd like to encourage people to go to, they can just Google Hennepin County Recycling, and then there's a green disposal guide that's listed. The categories are A through Z, and then everything's in there, and what to do with it. It's really wonderful.
It's really useful.
Yeah, and where to take it then too, like the drop-off sites that the county has.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, because not everything can go in your recycling cart
Yeah.
at home. So it's a matter of, well, where do I take it beyond the cart? Whether
Yeah.
it's electronics, appliances, tires, paint. We accept a lot of things at our 2 drop-off facilities, one of which is in Bloomington, right here.
Bloomington, yeah, real close. 98th and 96th in James, I guess is the address. Okay. 2 of you are master recyclers. Tell us a little bit about that. And you're involved with that program too, or not so much?
My coworker, Carolyn Colopy,
Is the person?
is the head of that program, and she organizes the classes and puts everything together and makes sure that we have a lot of recycling and composting experts all over the county.
Yep.
So and we have 2 right here, 2 experts.
So, what is a master recycler?
Well, I think people are familiar with like Master Gardener, and you can take classes to learn how to become a Master Gardener and provide public education to the county members of the county and that sort of thing. And that's the same with like a Master Recycler and Composter, is that you go through, is it 6 sessions? It's been a while since we've been through. Amanda and I were in the same cohort, So we're in the same course together, and you go through 5 or 6 sessions, and you learn the different aspects to recycling, to on a local level, to more on a larger county scale level of recycling and composting. And then you give back to the county, and you volunteer your time to work events, especially zero waste events. If we have time, I think we're going to talk about that. But just to help people and educate them on what's recyclable, what's compostable, because you'll see a lot of events in Hennepin County, especially in Minneapolis, where the garbage can is like this big, and then they have big bins for recycling and composting, organics collection. And that's the way we want it, because most of the items at this sort of event are able to be recycled or composted. And so we want to just educate individuals on why that is, why that's important, how to do it, and how to get involved with that sort of process. So,
And it's really for anybody, right?
Anybody in Hennepin County, I think.
Yeah, Hennepin County. But
And you know, your volunteer hours are done anywhere in Hennepin County, essentially, and that's how you become a certified master recycler, composter, is to do your 30 hours. But I think a lot of people who do the program just kind of keep on doing it forever, and you kind of get sucked in, and it's just a lot of fun. I think it's a great program, and you know, as Jeremy mentioned, it's the same kind of ideas as other master courses that something like the University of Minnesota Extension Service would do with Master Gardener. But the idea is there's only so many Bens in the world that can teach people about recycling, you know, from the county. And so the county offers this community education course to try to empower, you know, people in their communities to then go back to your city, go back to your neighborhood, and become a source of information for other residents in Hennepin County. So,
and it's amazing how many master recycler composters there are. I mean, and they're everywhere. I run into them all the time, and they're always doing good things. They're taking the initiative. And another thing I feel like the master recyclers do is you connect with people who have good intentions, but maybe are unsure about how to take that next step or what sort of action to take in the community. And then people like Amanda and Jeremy step in and say, "Hey, I can help you with that. What do you want to do? Hey, here are some ideas. Let's make it happen." So it's really a positive force for recycling and composting.
And I'm sorry, I'll put a plug in. I heard about the program through, I took the Citizens Academy through Hennepin County. So the Citizens Academy is, again, I think 7 sessions or 8 sessions, weekly sessions, and you learn about the workings of the county, how it works. And each week is a different topic. You know, it starts off with like taxes and sort of thing, and it gets into healthcare, and then recycling was one of them, and public safety. And so you go to different facilities in Hennepin County, and you learn about how they work and how it connects the communities and individuals to these sort of services. And so it was through that. And if anyone's interested in that, there's a little wait, you know, sign up for it. But it's really, really interesting to learn about how the county works. And the biggest thing for me was I learned who to connect to, who to contact when I have a question about a certain issue. County commissioners, is it someone else? So I have like a good idea of like where to start my search if I want an answer to something, or if I'm seeking some you know, problems that I want resolved. I know who to reach out to first. So it's very helpful. So that's a little plug for the Citizens Academy and Hennepin County has.
So people that are interested, just Google Hennepin County and then search for Citizens Academy.
Yeah.
It's information, it's all out there.
And with the Master Recycler program, the last thing I'll say is if you want a behind-the-scenes look, it's a great opportunity to do that because there are tours involved too. It's not just once a week in a classroom setting. It's getting out there. It's following it as it goes away from the curb or as it goes to a compost site or a recycling sorting facility.
Yeah, I would say that for me, the tour was probably the best part of the course. And it was optional, so I'm really glad that I did it because it was sort of a bonus day. But, you know.
Where did you go?
We went to a couple different places. So we did go to Arks Value Village, and we kind of saw the reuse end of things. But the first place we went to was Republic Recycling's MRF, and that's what what does MRF
Materials
stand for?
Recovery Facility.
Materials Recovery Facility, right. So a MRF is where they process the recycling, and we went to Republic's. And it was truly fascinating. So you don't have to do the MRC course to tour a recycling facility. Sometimes they set up tours that other people can go to. I still recommend that you do it through the Master Recycling course, because then you're with a big group of interested people. But that was really fascinating because you can kind of see the whole process from beginning to end, where the big pile of mixed recyclables comes in and
How it's sorted.
yeah, it's all sorted on these different conveyor belts, and you have, magnets pulling out the steel and kind of a reverse magnet called an eddy current, like shooting the aluminum cans out, and kind of like this. They call it an optical sorter, like a light stream that can go through the plastics and can actually identify the difference between some of the plastics and separate that, and then they have some hand sorting too. So it's sort of a mixed thing, and it was really, I think, useful to see that, because I think when you're on the other end and you're standing at your curb ready to recycle something, you maybe don't understand all the different processes that it has to go through in order to get to the end, and you might be tempted to recycle things that can't really be recycled. And I feel like I'm less likely to do that now that I've seen the process. Like, never ever put plastic bags in your curbside bin. You can recycle them at the Hennepin County drop-off facilities. You can recycle clean, dry plastic bags, but if you put them in the bin, they get caught up in all of those different machines, and they got to shut the whole operation down. So don't.
Well, and grocery stores take those plastic
Yep.
bags too.
Some do.
There's plenty
do.
of places.
Yep. So recycle your plastic bags. It's not in your bin.
And it comes back to what I was saying in the beginning about actually seeing where your trash goes, and you'll be a little more conscientious than if you actually see how it's processed, how it's utilized, where it's going. You might take a second thought to, like, where does this go? Does this go in the trash, or is this recycling? If they're recycling, how should I prepare it better to be processed in the recycling facility better? So I wish there was more education on that on a larger scale. I think people would be a little more in tune to how they dispose of their waste.
Okay, well, our primary focus is on organic recycling, but this all is fascinating, so I'm glad we talked about it. What is organic recycling? Ben, do you want to say what organic recycling is?
The biggest thing when we're talking about organics recycling is just food.
Food is the big thing.
And it's any type of food. So it could be, my 9-year-old ate a slice of pizza, and he was like, he got partway through it, and then it got all nasty, and I'm like, all right, I'm not going to eat that. I can throw that in the organics, and it can be composted. And then, in addition to food, it's non-recyclable paper items like tissues or napkins or paper towels or a pizza box or a paper egg carton. And then you're seeing more certified compostable items as well that are made out of, they feel a little and look a little bit like plastic, but they're made out of a compostable resin. So it can be composted through a big program at a commercial site, not necessarily in your backyard.
So these certifiables, are they a natural-based, organic type product? Like the resin that you're talking about, that is an organic to start with, kind of.
I could maybe try that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Ben. So the interesting thing about compostable plastics is, and here's kind of the dirty secret behind it, is it doesn't actually matter so much what it's made out of, because actually you can make compostable plastics out of regular oil. Because if we think about it, all oil is plant-based as well.
Right.
So all of our polymers in the world that make plastic come from plants. Some of those plants are millions of years old, and some were just grown this year. But the idea is it's not so much what it's made of, it's how it's made. And so the plastic is made in a certain way, the way that the polymers fit together, that it can break down in the environment under just the amount of heat that you get from an industrial composting facility. And that's the difference between a plastic that can break down in a couple of months versus one that's going to be in the ocean for 1,000 years. So it really has to do with how it's made, and that's an important distinction because sometimes you'll see products that say that they're biodegradable or they're made from plant-based products, and that does not mean that the plastic is compostable. So that's important. So you don't want to put something that says it's biodegradable or plant-based into your composting bin or your organics collection bin because it's not actually going to break down. You're going to want to look for those plastics that are certified compostable. And in the Twin Cities, the two major certifications that we have access to are BPI, there'll be a little symbol that says BPI, or Cedar Grove. Those are the two certifiers. So if it doesn't say that it's on a plastic, it's probably not actually compostable.
Yeah, and there's some cups that are made out of like a corn-based sort of plant.
Yeah, I've heard
But
that.
as Amanda is saying, it's not necessarily compostable. It may be biodegradable, but it's not necessarily compostable. So there's a little confusion there, and it's just those two logos that you got to look forward to. And one thing about cups, coffee cups especially, a lot of people think those are recyclable, but they're necessarily not recyclable because they're lined on the inside with this, what is it, plastic film?
Oh, you mean the paper coffee cups,
Yeah,
that they're
paper
not
cup.
compostable?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the important thing too is, if it's a paper product that's lined with some kind of plastic, it has to say that it's BPI or Cedar Grove certified to actually be compostable, because otherwise it's just lined with a type of wax or plastic that isn't actually compostable.
And the last thing we want is to have microplastics in our compost,
Right.
which we're putting on our gardens or our landscape, and then get that back into our system.
System, yeah.
Right.
And the why should we be doing this? And I'm looking at the percentage that we would be taking out of the garbage stream. Ben, I know it's on your website, so.
Oh yeah,
Well, what's the percentage there? Let's talk about
I
it.
got my hands dirty too. We did a trash sort to
Oh, cool.
to see what was left in the trash, and so we're looking through everything and categorizing materials, and organics by far is the biggest opportunity to reduce our trash. So it's 25-30% or more
Of food.
of what's left in our trash is organics. And it
Organic
seems,
material.
and when you're making the choice between, well, should we turn this into compost or should we put it in a landfill where maybe the best thing it's really doing is generating greenhouse gases? It seems like a no-brainer to try to recover that for a more beneficial use.
So that's the why of all this.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about the greenhouse gas side. So I think an important reason to compost, other than you make something useful out of it from something that would have been waste, is it is an important step toward helping to mitigate climate change. So when you throw your banana peel in the trash can and it goes to a landfill, it's going to be buried with a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's going to rot, and it's going to produce methane gas, which is a big greenhouse gas contributor to climate change. It's actually a lot more powerful than carbon dioxide. So the way that you keep the banana peel from just rotting, the reason it does that is because it doesn't have any oxygen when it's buried beneath all those different layers of trash.
Yeah, it has
so that's
to do with
yeah,
that.
so that's called anaerobic digestion or anaerobic composting. And when food scraps do anaerobic rotting, they let off all that methane. But in an industrial composting facility, which was the other place we got to go on our MRC field trip, they compost in a way where they're pumping air into the piles, and so you have oxygen in there. And when banana peel or any other kind of food breaks down with access to oxygen, it's not going to release that methane gas. So you don't get that harmful byproduct. And you do get a very useful byproduct of nutritious soil at the end of it. So that's another good reason to compost.
Yeah, and as long as you brought it up, what happens at the composting place? I guess we're a little ahead, but we'll go there as long as we start.
Let me back up.
or back up.
Besides, the reasons that Ben and Amanda were talking about, which are good for the environment and just good for sustainability. But I mean, from a personal side too, you can look at it saying, okay, if 35, 40, 50% of my trash is organics, and I can divert that out of my trash, you can decrease the amount of trash that you're throwing away each week, which ultimately can decrease your overall, waste disposal costs too for your family. So I mean, it's just on that level too. So on every single level, from a very personal level to the highest environmental level, you're doing the right thing, and it just makes sense, common sense, every step of the way there.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Melanie,
no,
with
that's
that, but-
okay. And I think, I know I had a brother who lived in Portland. He just recently moved back to Minnesota, but they're big time into the organics. And what they have discovered is that they pick up the organics every week, but their trash is so minimal, and it doesn't smell because there's not organics in it, that they can, maybe other than diapers, they can go to it every other week with the trash, and then organics every week.
Yeah.
And the recycling, I think, is still every other week also. But
It's great.
that
Save some money.
Yeah.
That's
a
right.
good
Yeah.
thing.
You can get a smaller trash cart
There
in
you
a lot of
go.
instances, and save some
So
money.
since we brought it up, okay, we're organic recycling. We have curbside or drop off. Where does this go? You talk about industrial. Somebody want to talk about an industrial composting site?
Yeah, we can try to paint a picture
Yeah.
here. I think,
pretty
Jeremy, were you able to make
No,
it to the
I wasn't,
composting site too?
unfortunately. I
Okay.
had
I-
a job.
'Cause it's amazingly
Huge.
huge.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, what do you think the piles are? About 10 feet tall and 100 feet long.
At least, yeah.
Well-
Maybe taller.
Maybe we should clarify the difference between like backyard composting to
We're going to get to
industrial.
back
Okay.
composting.
But one big difference is the temperature that the
Oh.
pile of compost can get to. So with industrial composting, you were talking about this before, Amanda, is that the temperatures internally get much, much higher. So you have more availability of what you can compost at like curbside or drop off at on an industrial level compared to like backyard composting.
Right.
So you have way more flexibility with what can go in and what can be composted at that level.
Right. And the two biggest reasons are to kind of finish with the picture. The difference between your backyard compost pile and something that they have in an industrial composting site is mostly scale.
Yeah.
So as Ben said, there's these huge long piles that they call windrows, and many composting facilities have pipes running through those piles that they pump air through, and so they're able to get that oxygen inside, and the oxygen actually helps stimulate all the good bacteria that are in there and create that breakdown process, and that's what heats up the pile to about 150 degrees.
And does the heat also contribute to the speed of breakdown?
It does.
It does.
I mean,
Yeah, and if you think about an experiment, I remember once I had to try it myself, but I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm going to take this, certified compostable, BPI approved
Spoon.
spoon, and put it in my backyard compost, and then I checked on it,
happened.
like 3 months later at the end of the summer, and it was still there, like perfectly intact. Whereas at a commercial composting site, it's just, it's going to be
6 weeks.
gone in a flash. They have to keep it at least 131 degrees for many days in a row just to meet their standards. And so it's cranking away. Even in the winter, the piles are cranking away at a commercial site. So it's
That's
going
amazing.
fast.
Usually they say between 130 and 170 degrees Fahrenheit are the temperature of these piles, and that's hot enough to break down plastics. It's hot enough to kill pathogens,
that's
and
important.
break down like fats and meats and bones, and even kill weed seeds, all things that you wouldn't want to put in your backyard compost because they wouldn't break down.
And okay, so then they got this pile of, I don't know what you call it, gunk. I don't
Organics.
know.
Yeah,
Do they still filter it or make it finer before they actually sell it? And we'll talk about selling, but is there another process, kind of a purifier type?
Yeah, they can
Or
run
a filter, maybe it's
They can run it through a number of screens to separate out any material that's unwanted. They have to meet a lot of different standards, and they sell different products too, so they can decide what type of compost they want to create at the end.
So what kind of products are they selling?
Well, it depends if they're selling to maybe a transportation project or a golf course or maybe to you and me, so they have a lot of different customers.
Okay, so it's
You could
depending
be a
on what it's
customer,
going to
Maureen.
be used for in the long run. I
You
mean,
should.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Yeah.
purchase nice fresh black compost in bags that you add to your garden. At the consumer level, or some of it ends up sold to the state or the county to spray along highways where they're trying to grow grass, and they want that to
Like
happen faster.
nutrient.
So there's different scales and different products that come out.
all a good thing. So let's talk about, we know why now, and we know what about organic composting. Now the county wants to encourage cities to do this. And what are they doing to encourage cities to?
The how question, right?
Yeah.
How are we going to make this happen?
Because cities don't like to pay money for anything,
Well, we for
other
many.
than the police and fire.
Yeah, I mean, waste service is it's a basic service, and for many years the county has supported city recycling programs with funding.
Yeah.
That goes back way before my time, and now we're saying, hey, well, let's, instead of just putting all that money into basic recycling, which is 30 years old now, it should be able to, move out of the basement, live on its own a little bit. So we're saying we're going to dedicate more money to organics, and the cities can use that to develop their programs. Our preference is for the development of curbside programs because you can put more things in there. It's more convenient. But we're also interested in making funding available for organics drop-off sites. And I know maybe some of us have taken advantage of those drop-off sites in our time living in the metro area. I know I used a drop-off site before curbside organics came to Minneapolis. So I think we're looking at a variety of options, and we know it just doesn't happen all at once, just like that. So we want to figure out ways to get from point A to point B.
Right.
Now there's a grant process. Cities have to apply for the money, and they get some money
That's right. There's
to set up like a drop-off or something like that.
There's an annual application process for our curbside funding, and then we're on the verge of releasing our application for organics drop-off sites for funding for that.
So
tell me what an organic drop-off site looks like.
Well, it varies, I think, from city to city. I mean, Minneapolis has, they have curbside organics collection, but they also have various drop-off sites scattered throughout the city. And the ones that I've seen and visited they look like recycling bins or garbage bins, but they're green, and they have a little vent at the top, and they're locked, and you sign up on the city's website, and they give you the code and all the information, and you just drop off your organics collections there weekly, daily, depending on how much you use. Other places, I know like in Bloomington here, and Ramsey County has a few drop-off sites. These are bigger dumpster size drop-off sites where I think the majority of them are fenced in with like a wooden fence, and they're gated and they're locked, and to prevent contamination. That's one thing we didn't mention about the organics collection, the damage that contamination can do. But they have it, so you have to sign up with the city, and usually they give you the code, and then there's compostable bags in there that you can take home after you drop it off. So it varies from city to city. It just depends on how the city, if they get the grant money from the county, how they decide to utilize that money. Is it one big drop-off site facility, or is it a couple smaller ones scattered throughout the city? But I think the majority of them are just larger drop-off. One large dumpster that they use that is locked in somehow, that when you sign up and register with the city or county, you get the password.
Right, and we should mention that signing up is free for those locations that we've seen, it's free because we have the grant opportunities to build it. So once it's established, it's free for residents to sign up. They just want people to sign up so that that's an opportunity to educate people about what goes in the bin and what does not go in the bin, and to keep people from just walking by with their plastic fast food cup and tossing it in what seems to be a garbage can, but is not. So the locks are really just there to help with quality control, but it is a free program.
And to learn more about where specifically they are, you can just Google, Bloomington organics drop-offs, or there's some in Hopkins, St. Louis Park, Minneapolis, and they have good information about where you can go and how to sign up.
And for those of us that our city hasn't done this yet, I'll use the word yet because I think most of us hope that every city will be doing this. I believe the Hennepin County hazardous waste drops off sites now take organics too. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, somebody?
Sure. In the past, we only accepted organics from the public at our Brooklyn Park drop-off site, and with somewhat limited hours. I don't think we accepted organics on Saturdays, but now we added organics to the list of acceptable materials at our Bloomington drop-off, and we said, all right, you can bring them in on Saturday too if you're having a zero waste party, a graduation party, and you want to bring in your organics, you can do that as well.
And the key thing for that is having, BPI bags? Is that?
You want to use a compostable bag
Right.
if you're collecting in that.
Certified.
And many people are familiar with that through probably yard waste collection or other experiences.
Okay. So that's a good point for people to
Yeah.
do. I mean, we can start using it doing it right now.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good trial
Start
run.
this week.
Yeah.
Okay. There's probably some things that we haven't mentioned that go in them. Stuff like coffee grounds can be compostable.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that are compostable. So any kind of food, which includes coffee, it includes tea leaves, some tea bags, as long as it doesn't have staples or the tea bag isn't made out of some kind of plastic. You can usually throw those in there.
And we're talking about industrial composting here.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
right, not
just
necessarily
just
backyard.
so the viewers are aware of that. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people, I throw flowers that I get on various occasions, I just throw them into the garden. But for people that don't have a garden or a flower bed, they can just put them in that bag with their food, right? And it'll go out.
Houseplant trimmings, usually.
Hair even.
Yeah, hair, pet hair, not pet waste. You can't put that
Right.
in.
Good point.
That is something you do not want to compost,
No.
either not in your backyard and not in industrial level. It's too much of a hazard. But pet hair is fine. Eggshells, like.
Pizza boxes, everyone eats pizzas, just
Right.
as long as it's not. Well, is it at an industrial level? Greasy pizza boxes okay still?
The greasy ones are just fine.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. It's more if you have a frozen pizza,
Right,
pick
the
out the
line.
frozen food section. That should go. That should be kept out of the organics.
Yeah, the pizza,
Those
frozen
boxes are lined
food
with
boxes.
plastic.
In the plastic, sometimes they're in a box and sometimes there also is an additional plastic.
Right.
That all needs to go in the trash, correct?
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Would now be a good time to talk about the difference between yard waste and organics? Because I feel like we haven't clarified that yet.
Yes,
We might come to that
yeah,
later.
I was just going to get
Okay.
that. Yard waste. Let's talk a little
Sure.
bit about, because that's also organic, obviously.
Yeah, so that was something that confused me quite a bit too when I started taking the Master Recycler Composter course, because I was like, well, it's all leaves and sticks
Right.
and grass. All these things are
So
organic.
Carbon and nitrogen.
Yeah, and all those things are perfectly compostable. You can compost them in your backyard. You can compost the leaves and grass and sticks along with your eggshells and banana peels in your backyard. But from a county standpoint, and this has more to do with Minnesota law than with biology, we do need to keep those things separate. So at the Hennepin County drop-off sites, when they say they take organics, they mean all these things we've been talking about: food, paper towels, and compostable plastics, but not yard waste. And the reason for that, there's a couple different reasons, but one reason is that there's so much more yard waste than food, and so that would sort of overwhelm the amount of food. And an industrial composting site will use a certain ratio of like food to leaves or greens to browns when they're mixing up their recipe. And the other reason is that Minnesota law requires a different sort of setup for composting facilities for food wastes versus yard waste. Food waste is regulated more similarly to landfills in that they need a special type of clay liner to compost the food scraps on top of. And it's more expensive, and so most of the composting sites that we have don't have as much space to compost those food scraps as they do for the yard waste. And so at this time, if we were to mingle our yard waste and food waste, it would sort of contaminate all the yard waste too, and they wouldn't be able to compost in as big of an area, basically.
So if I'm doing backyard composting, which probably does have my yard waste in it, I could put in an apple core, but not meat, and certainly not bones, and certainly not oils and fats.
Right.
But that stuff could go into an organics recycling.
Yeah,
That's correct.
At a backyard level, it just doesn't, your compost pile doesn't get warm enough to be able to break those sort of materials down, and then it draws in unwanted rodents
Critters.
and pests.
It does.
Yep.
It does.
Yeah,
Ridgefield coyotes and raccoons.
The coyotes, the deer, and
Yeah,
raccoons.
I like to think of my backyard compost as a vegan diet, with the exception of eggshells.
Yeah.
You can compost eggshells in your backyard; they're a good source of calcium. But everything else should be a vegan diet, plant-based only for your backyard compost.
That's a good way of thinking about that. That's very
Yeah.
good. And coffee grounds can be scattered over garden or flower beds or stuff because
Coffee
that's-
grounds, tea leaves,
Yeah.
even some people compost tissue, paper and napkins and stuff in their backyard compost because it doesn't have to get quite as hot to break down Kleenex and stuff as it does for compostable plastics. So some people do, recycle their kind of napkins and stuff or compost their napkins in their backyard.
They might be more vigilant about
They might be a
turning the pile
bit more
too.
vigilant. I don't think that I've had a lot of success composting napkins in my backyard compost, but we are not very vigilant at turning it. We like the lasagna method, as we learned, just keep putting it on top.
Check in later.
Yeah, some other things you might not think about that you might want to not compost in your backyard would be weed seeds, like weeds of any kind.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you have a flower vase that has seeds in it and you don't know what those are, that might be an invasive species, and that's not going to break down in your backyard compost, so you don't want to introduce that to the environment. And surprisingly enough, black walnut shells, because black walnut trees produce a toxin that can kill other plants, and that doesn't break down in either, I think, your backyard or industrial compost.
No, yeah.
So if it gets in there, it can contaminate the soil that comes out and not be very good for gardens. So unfortunately, don't compost your black walnut shells.
Those do
If you have a
go in
black
the
walnut
garbage.
tree, be careful about those shells.
Okay. We're running out of time. I think we've covered a lot. The one thing that's left and I only want to bring it up because I think a lot of people don't know about it. Another source of garbage is clothing that we throw away. And I read somewhere is that the average person throws away 70 pounds of clothing a year. I know I don't.
Holy cow.
Shocking.
Insane.
So,
Blows me away. I don't even
so
know
other
70
than the reuse, where give it to Valley Village, United Way, or Goodwill, or any place, there are some things that just get either too beat up or too stained. That we have a source for those now in terms of recycling, and where is that?
That's right. You can bring that to our Hennepin County drop-off facilities as well in Brooklyn Park and in Bloomington. But this also ties into our conversation about buying reuse
or reduce.
and reducing in the
and
first
reuse,
place, or buying durable.
Yeah, so I wear shirts, normal shirts, and then once they get kind of worn and beat up, they become workout shirts, so like I work out in, and once those become too much, they become like rags or towels or what I need. And so instead of using paper towel or continuously using different rags, I just got these old shirts that I use until they're pretty much nothing's left of them, and then dispose of them. So,
Well, but you know, there are things that even, you know, like I use socks for rags for cleaning, but eventually they get
Right.
kind of icky too. But you can bring them, and shoes you can bring
Yep.
That's
to
right.
those drop-off
That's right.
sites, and
So the-
backpacks, and a whole bunch of different things.
Right.
Yeah,
So the textile nature of those things is all very recyclable. I think at the drop-off facility, you know, they might recycle them into rags or something because the scraps of fabric have to be a certain size. I think like 1 by 2 feet. But some places like I think Goodwill and ARC's Value Village to some extent will take any kind of textile, no matter how ruined it is, as long as it's you know, kind of clearly labeled in a bag like scrap rag fabric so it doesn't get mixed in with the good clothes. And they'll sell at places that grind it up into kind of a material that can be used to make a variety of things, stuffing and filler for different things. So,
Well, and pillows. I've brought pillows to the drop-off site. They said they accept them.
Yeah, that's a good way to be thrifty and get the most out of every item we're using.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end. It's very rapidly. Is there anything that you just want to mention before we say goodbye?
I would say if you have the opportunity to do organics recycling, give it a try. You'll be amazed how easy it is and how little trash you have left.
Amanda? anything?
yeah, I'd say the same thing. I actually think it's kind of fun to do backyard composting, but you know, if you don't have that option, check out some of these other places like a drop-off site because there's a lot of good that can be done with just a little bit of effort, and it's fun.
yeah, I think to summarize, just think about when you're buying something, just be conscientious of like what that waste product is going to look like, and you know, make the right choices and when you dispose of your waste, and there's a lot of choices. And just do the right thing.
Well, again, I want to thank you so much for coming. I know you guys can probably find other things that would be more fun than being on the show. But
What's more fun than talking about
Definitely,
recycling and
definitely.
composting,
We'll
Marie?
do this for another hour.
Keep it rolling.
Okay. So again, Ben Knudsen from the county, and then our 2 master recyclers, Amanda and Jeremy. Thank you for being on the show. To my listeners, thank you and good night. And recycle.